What's going on, guys? The Buff Torchic here, and today I'm reviewing Sobbing Sobble, mainly just because this actually is probably one of the worst episodes of Journeys to date. Disclaimer, I haven't seen the sub, so they're probably worst episodes up there. Also, I haven't seen Betrayed, Bothered, Beleaguered. That one could obviously be worse than Sobbing Sobble, but as of right now, this one has probably one of the worst structured episodes ever. The entire episode is just forced, and not only a recycled plot of Trainer A finds a Pokemon. That Pokemon leaves Trainer A. Then Trainer A says some cool things about that Pokemon, and then the Pokemon wants to train with Trainer A, which has been done countless times with Ash and other people like Dawn. But Sobbing Sobble is just such an unfortunate episode because of how bland and boring it can be. On top of that, you can tell that it's just so unknowing of what to do with itself. The jokes are probably the biggest problem this episode faces. Mainly just because the jokes themselves would conflict with the plot. For one, they're unfunny, let me get that straight. I only laughed once, and it wasn't even at a joke that was plot important. And the fact that there are jokes that are important to the plot of the episode make no sense, but also just shouldn't exist because it makes the episode come across as lazy because you're combining two separate areas of comedy and storytelling into something that, when the comedy fails, all you're left is with a story. And newsflash, you don't make good stories with comedy. If the jokes were funny, then that would be somewhat justifiable. But if the jokes are unfunny, then you're just left with a sloppy story. But that sloppy story gets even more sloppy when you consider how forced this episode really is. So for one thing, the goggles that at the end of the episode save the day? What even was that? Because the whole joke was I don't even know if it was a joke. Mr. Mime, he was like cutting onions and stuff, and that was the secret surprise weapon that saved the day from Team Rocket, even though, for one thing, unfunny. But for the second thing, we didn't even see Go get the goggles. There was no time that Go ran to some random department store, got back to the bridge to meet up with Ash at that moment. So it's not only forced, but literally impossible within the episode. There are other forced parts of this episode too that just make it not good. Like how Go accidentally catches Sobble, how Sobble listens to Go immediately after getting caught, but then runs away a little bit later. Go not realizing that Sobble is covered in sand and therefore can't go invisible is just inattentive on his part. Ash felt kind of forced in this episode just because of his incredible lack of role in the episode, besides him just being a yes man to Go whenever he loses Sobble. Jesse somehow being able to hit Sobble when it's invisible was incredibly forced. Team Rocket buying a cheap enough cage where Sobble can break free is forced, and the entire ending of Go thinking Sobble isn't weak was incredibly forced as well. This one is probably the biggest part of the episode, since the ending, I think, is probably the worst part, and I have to explain myself on this one, I believe. This episode was very plainly describing Sobble as timid and nothing else. Even when Team Rocket calls Sobble a crybaby, it never once implied its strength. This episode is not only confusing a shyness with weakness, but then pretends to know the difference by saying Sobble is timid, but not weak. Even when in that episode, it's only implied by Go and Sobble at the end of the episode that he's weak, even when he starts out strong on a Silicabra. The episode resolves a problem that is brought up last minute that was loosely connected to the beginning. So many plot important scenes are just forced down your throat because either a joke accidentally becomes important or the joke themselves takes away screen time from actually telling a good developed story. Overall, I give it a 2 out of 5. The fact that it is necessary to watch the plot of JN is unfortunate. Although there are aspects that entertain me, it did give me the feeling of sitting through that episode, and even when I was critiquing it and getting annoyed at all the plot holes that it has, I still found myself filled and bored with downtime, where not even I could entertain myself during the experience, to the point where it not only became boring, but downright bad. It's just, I could see maybe why some people could like this episode, but honestly, if you enjoy it heavily based on structure, then you're just lying to yourself, because enjoyability would only really come from Sobble existing now. The insane structural problems and plot holes make this episode pretty bad. It may have fun things inside of it that people can justify the episode for existing, but on a purely structural basis and purely critiquing it as an episode of a TV show rather than a showcase of Pokemon, then yeah, this is pretty bad.